the edge of the Des Plaines River, 9 miles from Chicago's center, we find a unique example of the 19th century's most talented landscape architects, engineers, and architects working together to create a new kind of community, one in which nature would become an integral and essential part of everyday living for all its residents. The result was Riverside, where families would dwell together amid a setting of wooded groves and meadows along a curving stream. In 1869, the landscape architectural firm of Frederick Law Olmsted and his partner Calvert Vaux prepared the General Plan of Riverside. They created one of the earliest totally planned suburban communities, a rural, self-contained community providing all the civilizing advantages found in the city at that time within a rural, country-like atmosphere. These civilizing advantages included such amenities as easy access from Chicago. The train had already been extended here, and Olmsted proposed a divided approach road to link to the city. Riverside had the best engineered streets of the time, with cobblestone gutters for proper drainage, sewers, water lines, gas lines, and gassed street lamps. To provide the rural, country-like setting, vast amounts of public lands were set aside, almost half of the entire village. There are 2 large commons, Scottswood and Long Common, an extensive riverbank area, triangular islands dispersed throughout the village, and varying public right-of-ways. All the best land was for the public use for all time. The depressed curvilinear roadway system broke away from the typical grid street plan. There were large residential lots, and residents were encouraged to plant 2 trees in their front yard, as nature and the landscape was always to be of the utmost importance throughout the village. By 1871, Riverside had a water tower, a commercial building, the Union Church, a new train depot, and a 125-room hotel. Over 50 homes had been completed. The Great Chicago Fire and the subsequent financial panic in 1873 left the Riverside Improvement Company bankrupt. But fortunately for us, Olmsted's plan was basically complete, becoming in time the outstanding example of suburban town planning that it is today. In 1970, Riverside was designated a National Historic Landmark for its contribution to the history and the development of the United States. Over the years, the village has attracted works of outstanding architects, and many of these structures remain today. In 1991, the village adopted a preservation ordinance to protect Riverside's plan with its public lands. Within this ordinance, significant historical structures may be designated as local landmarks. Today, there are over 50. In this series, we will look at 4 of the landmark homes. These owners have graciously agreed to let us explore their property from the outside and the inside. So now, let's begin our tour. The John C. Dorr Esquire Cottage at 100 Fairbank Road is truly one of Riverside's magnificent landmarks. Built 130 years ago in 1869, it is one of the oldest structures in the village and the only remaining residence designed by the renowned firm of Olmsted Vaux and Company, the planners of Riverside. We in Riverside are fortunate to have many fine examples of architecture. However, the Dorr House, perhaps more than any structure, reflects the integration of architectural design with the philosophy of the village's plan. That is, the relationship of building to site and its natural surroundings. This, of course, is due to the expertise and collaboration of architect Calvert Vaux and landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted. The 1871 promotional brochure by the Riverside Improvement Company depicted 3 houses designed by the company Olmsted Vaux and Company. The decorative window frames have small corbels or brackets beneath the sills and a thin lintel or hood atop the tall, narrow openings. The house is a low Swiss cottage, the upper story overhanging the lower, with the upper balconies in unexpected places, giving a very picturesque appearance. The situation is a very fine one. The church, with its broad grounds on one side, the river and picnic island on the other, while the house fronts upon one of the principal roads, with a view extending to the depot and the water tower. This 1871 description of the house and site and the surrounding landscape essentially remain the same today. The architect's excellent sense of proportion, detail, and style are evident in the placement of the windows, the balconies, and the center balcony projecting over the entry with the bracketed overhangs. The Dorr Cottage has received numerous awards and acclaim, including recognition by the State of Illinois in 1972, the DAR in 1978, the Illinois State Historical Society in 1990, and the Dorr Cottage was designated a Riverside Local Landmark in 1993. The house was originally built as a summer cottage for prominent Chicagoan John Clark Dorr, the first superintendent of Chicago Public Schools, a president of the Chicago Board of Trade, and an Illinois state senator from 1869 till 1873. This home has enticed two owners into major restoration projects over its long life. The first in 1921, after the building had been left abandoned and vandalized. And again, nearly 1/2 century later, restoration began in 1975, after the home had again fallen into serious disrepair. In the 1920s, Miss Marie Ellemund saved the cottage from being razed. It was lifted from its foundation in order to add a basement. At that same time, central heating, running water, and electricity were added. Bathrooms were created. Unfortunately, in Miss Ellemund's later years, she became unable to cope with her many cats. The cottage suffered severe damage. Then, in 1975, approximately 50 years after the first restoration, Mr. and Mrs. William Miller acquired the structure and felt duty-bound to save and restore it again. Architect Calvert Vaux's own publication, Villas and Cottages, originally published in the 1850s, was the main source of reference for the Millers. During the second major restoration, which lasted from about 1975 until 1990, the cottage became of such interest to students of architecture that guest books were made available to visitors, and the books were filled with names from around the world. The house gives a feeling of openness, airiness, and escape to nature inherent in the philosophy of the village itself. At one time, a huge barn stood behind the house. This barn was raised in 1920. In 1982, an open, barn-like structure was built to match the details of the existing house. The original window shutters are all in working order and are today stained walnut finish. The tall windows reach to the floor to ensure a breeze throughout the house, important in the days before air conditioning. Heating was originally confined to 4 fireplaces. And of these spectacular white marble fireplaces, 3 remain today. It is said that in 1900, the owners of the house, the Holton family, were relatives of Andrew Jackson, and that they kept his portrait hung over the living room fireplace. The O'Donnell family purchased the cottage from the Millers in the early 1990s, and today have continued the maintenance and preservation of the home while they raise their family. The 1970s restoration included hand-stripping many coats of paints on the magnificent cantilevered mahogany staircase. This wide stairway boasts 54 turned spindles, 21 steps, a wide curved handrail, and 2 large newel posts. The second floor contains former servants' rooms located at the first landing. Three larger bedrooms are located at the top of the stairs. Each of these rooms has one of the balconies that overlook the magnificent site and the beautiful public lands. The John C. Dorr Esquire Cottage is a rare and unique example of this period of American architectural development. This home shows the 19th century evolvement of a new type of residence, one that is neither urban nor totally rural in character. It is a single-family detached cottage on a large parcel of domestic suburban land. The elegant woodwork exemplifies the carpenter's unique ability at that time to create and incorporate intricate detail in the residential structures, while the landscaping of the site is beautifully integrated with the natural landscape concept developed by Olmsted Vaux and Company for the public lands of Riverside. Most importantly, the Dorr Cottage is today an essential part of our heritage, and it has been preserved for our children and grandchildren.